because today we're going to do them a little bit differently than we have over the last few weeks. What we're going to do is we're actually going to have nominations today, nominations for the best director, who our panelists think that the best directors would be. I'm going to go ahead and ask, and we're going to start with Adrian. I hope you don't mind going first today, Adrian.
Sure don't.
And Adrian, who do you nominate as the best director?
I think we're going to give our notable mentions first.
Yeah, notable mentions.
My notable mention would go firstly to J.J. Abrams, who all of you would know has just rebooted Star Trek, and has also...
Sorry, 5% of the room knows that.
So nobody knows that? Okay. He's just done the second film in the new Star Trek reboot. He also rebooted the Mission Impossible series as well, and he's well known in television. My second notable mention would probably go to Steven Soderbergh, a director who I really love, who does a lot of films about the human condition and why we're here, and he's probably most known for films where the stories overlap, like Traffic. But my pick for best director today would go to Christopher Nolan.
Can we have the lights, please? That'd be great. All right, some great movies there.
Some great films.
Yeah.
Basically, Christopher Nolan has a canon of original films that toy with the idea of persistence of memory, time, and identity. Nolan's films are generally about characters that are haunted by memories that both spur them on and also immobilise them. They define their loves and their hatreds, their hopes and their fears, the sheer essence of their being. You could say his films delve into the human condition. The key to Nolan's success would appear to lie in providing 2 parts complexity and 1 part simplicity, with characters being the latter. Reality is often an abstract concept in a Nolan film, forever in flux, or at the very least, not very linear. While he is most famous for successfully rebooting the Batman franchise, my belief is that Inception is one of his seminal works. And it is the purest example of his style and storytelling, and could quite possibly come to be as his quintessential work. It's based around a metaphysical heist, for those of you who haven't seen it. His lead is an outlaw who trades in a new line of corporate espionage, having devised a way to infiltrate a person's subconscious in order to steal valuable information. And the film is essentially told in a straightforward fashion. I don't have to read this because it's a pretty involved sentence. The film is essentially told in a straightforward fashion that fractures the momentum by cutting between 4 different states of dreaming, each simultaneously moving forward alongside one another, but where time elapses at sequential rates of acceleration. The interchanging between these 4 levels creates a fusion of parallel action and suspense, with each furious race against time unfolding within another race against time. So it is in many respects both the ultimate thriller and the best example of his obsession with bending time and reality. The film's tantalising final shot throws all the credibility that we've gained from the film out the window and into question. So I think that often directors would like to make interesting films, but what makes Nolan special is he's able to sell an interesting film to an audience. And for a filmmaker with a fondness for stories that revolve around puzzles, perhaps his greatest trick has been to capture the imaginations of a generation of moviegoers that have become used to leaving their minds at home when they're visiting the cinema. He has directed films that make you think even as you watch, something we here on the panel would strongly advocate.
There you go. All right. Yeah, definitely. So definitely interesting, definitely worth considering as far as looking at the greatest one. I definitely think The Top is actually ranks probably one of the top 5 at the end of Inception. It's probably one of the most frustrating endings to a movie, but one of the most brilliant to the ending. Yeah, and Memento I think still ranks as one of my favorites. I think it's a great film. All right. Now, the next nomination to you, Mark. Who would be your nomination for Best Director?
It's a difficult thing because it's kind of like saying, what's that film that's built around top five lists? It's
High Fidelity.
High Fidelity. And so he's actually asked one day, the key character of High Fidelity is asked, what's your favourite song? And he goes, what, in the club or in the bathroom? Or if I'm at home? And so your favourite film, your favourite director, it's got a lot to do with how you feel at this point in time. So I like you, were torn. I'm sitting there going, gosh, I would say Ridley Scott if I felt like a Saturday night with mates. And because there's no one better for showing us the other and scaring us with the idea of the other. Than Ridley Scott. He's amazing. And then it depends too if you sort of who was I just thinking of then? I've got to make notes too, because you have too many ideas. Woody Allen is. I was really tempted not to say Woody Allen because I would sound like a prat. Because I want to say straight after it, but I only like his early stuff. And that's a bit tragic. But it's true that Woody Allen is the master of finding the ridiculous in life, and sort of showing us how silly our lives can be and our objections. But that's not who I finished with.
Okay.
I finished with the safest bet on the planet. And, I'm going with Steven Spielberg. So let's have a look at this.
Can we have some lights? Thanks. Wow.
Who didn't just relive like almost every Saturday film they ever watched as a child growing up? Just that. Now, there's a reason for that, because Spielberg cut his teeth on his own childhood. He basically is bringing back to us the 1950s matinee. That Saturday film that kids went to watch. And he talks about it himself in interviews, just that his fundamental experience was trying to bring back that wonder of turning up in the cinema to watch a double feature on a Saturday that would go on and just some great adventure. And this is what Raiders of the Lost Ark comes out of, those sorts of matinee films. And what he is really famous for is a couple of things you can really look for and just enjoy. In the Spielberg, you will always find two types of shot that are just always there. The POV, the point of view shot. So there's classic point of view shots that you'll know of. In Jurassic Park, he looks in the mirror and there's the dinosaur, running up, and there's the objects may appear larger, that sort of line. All that sort of point of view, because it draws you in. It makes you. And the other one is the ECU soliloquy, which is just a very funny way of saying the extreme close-up point of reference for the actor, where they stop and there is that moment where you can see rather than hear the dialogue. And it's full of it. All this stuff. And some people say, well, look, yeah, it is full of it. That's just sentimental and that's silly. But it touches us. And that's why I basically finish by saying that the reason why I like Spielberg is because I call him like the prophet of wonder. Okay, because his films are filled with this childlike sense of this view of the world, this moment of wonder, and you find it in all the films. It's incredible, even the dark ones. Okay, you might say, okay, I can see it when I see Jurassic Park. Don't worry, Soundos, I won't bang my chest anymore. If you see it in Jurassic Park when they get out of the Land Rovers and all of a sudden, there are the dinosaurs for the first time, or if you see it in Artificial Intelligence where he finally gets to see, the robot child gets to hug his mother, or all these sorts of moments, or let's face it, absolutely iconic, E.T., the bicycle flying over the moon. Okay, you just see that in so many different films done again and again and again. And what he is touching at is something really, really interesting in human psychology. And it's what some authors, a fellow called C.S. Lewis, call joy. That this connection, this ephemeral moment where we realise that there is something much bigger and more meaningful and in fact warm and loving out there that we want to be part of. And if you just focus on the details, you'll lose it. It disappears very quickly. But that sense of something warm and out there that we need to be part of is what Spielberg is a master of doing. And so, frankly, he only got an Academy Award for Best Director when he did Schindler's List. But I mean, he's the guy who will always pick it up for best special effects, best art direction, things like that. So it's a bit of a pity. But,
all right. Thanks so much, Mark. Yeah, I don't know how many of you, can say, where was I when I saw E.T. for the first time or something like that. Yeah. All right.
Or the 19th time.
Yeah, exactly.
I was on Channel 10. That's where I was.
That's right. Okay, well, Ben, now we're up to your choice. And I'm looking forward to seeing what your choice for Best Director.
I just had to think really quickly about the notable mentions because Mark robbed my Woody Allen, and for the same reasons I was going to mention Woody Allen. So thank you very much. I think I'll jump to a more recent choice of Paul Thomas Anderson, who made There Will Be Blood, probably most famous, but Punch Drunk Love, Boogie Nights that he's made. This isn't me endorsing that you should go see these movies. You might be quite affronted by what's in them, but he's like modern Martin Scorsese, I think. That's what, even though Martin Scorsese is still around and making movies, but he's the modern Martin Scorsese. The other honourable mention to make me sound smart and intellectual is Akira Kurosawa, the great Japanese director, most famous for Seven Samurai, Ran, those kind of movies. But now, because also, it's just too like, I get the easy one, really. It's easy. Alfred Hitchcock, right?
Yeah.
But the clip we're going to
Set
show
it up.
is a little bit different to what these guys have shown. This isn't a collection of all of Alfred Hitchcock's works, because I imagine most people in this room have at least seen some or know about Alfred Hitchcock. Instead, we're going to see an example of Alfred Hitchcock's work.
There we go. Use the lights. Thanks.
I'm hoping the laughs and the coughing and the nervous laughter and nervous coughing that was happening during that scene. As I'm sure everyone's aware, Alfred Hitchcock's known as the master of suspense. I think that scene's a really good example. I'm not sure if everyone here has seen The Birds, but that scene is like plonk kind of right in the middle of the film. And what I liked about it, and what I'm hoping everyone else here can tell about the scene, is that Alfred Hitchcock is remarkably simple and effective at what he does. And often a lot of what the most memorable stuff that Alfred Hitchcock did was because he liked to not give away things too much, and he'd sort of do all this sleight of hand things, and things are ominous, like the kids singing in the background, a woman sitting on a bench smoking. She seems kind of unsettled but getting a bit more relaxed, and then a few birds descend in the playground behind her. And then instead of just showing the birds all descending or focusing in on the woman and she's really nervous, instead he adds all these elements together in a way that almost distracts you and almost makes you feel at ease, even though you know the sense of ominousness is happening and coming. And then I think the shot of the bird flying and landing in the playground itself is amazing because by this stage you kind of think you know what's going to happen, and if you've seen anything earlier in The Birds, you do. But often Hitchcock's films were great at building stuff that you actually didn't even see coming until it actually did at the time. So on this example, though, I think it's great. And what he does is, instead of doing what a lot of modern directors would do now, which is just show you everything, Alfred Hitchcock wouldn't do that. And I hope that kid's song doesn't haunt your dreams for the rest of the week. So creepy. Now, us talking about Christopher Nolan, Steven Spielberg, Alfred Hitchcock, Woody Allen, Akira Kurosawa, Steven Soderbergh, all these guys, we thought it would be good to finish off Secret Hollywood focusing on the director. Now, sure, you guys being here for the last couple of weeks would demonstrate that you like movies, but maybe you actually don't know what the director does. I think we talk a lot about directors, but do we actually know what they do? Well, simply put, a director is like the chief creative controller of a film. Their vision should be the unifying force which informs everything in a film. So everything from the performances to the camera angles to the music to whether there's going to be 3 pot plants in this scene or 2. They should be over all of that. Now, when it comes to talking about good films, personal taste is always going to dominate that debate. It's always quite a subjective argument, as we should have demonstrated in the last couple of weeks and probably will in the next few minutes. But if you look at all the lists of best movies ever, there's a consistency across those lists, which would suggest that these movies are good, at least in the sense of a well-crafted film, which begs the question, can a good movie be made by a bad director? Or let's ask it the other way, could a bad director make a good movie? Now, the hallmarks of a good director are pretty evident. So everything from, think about the sweeping expanse of Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings trilogy, or the deceptively complex, yet apparently simple makeup of Frank Darabont's The Shawshank Redemption. You've probably probably sick of hearing about Citizen Kane, but you really need to think about the game-changing impact that director Orson Welles had on everything from editing to scripting to just the camera angles in cinema. He had an amazing impact with that film. So whether we're talking about Casablanca or The Godfather or Pulp Fiction, movies that are revered as good, they usually project a united, a coherent, a calculated intent. You know, like the orchestration of all the film's components have been put together by a meticulous manager, as if the finished product was foreknown. Now, walk away for a minute from the silver screen and think about the reality that we exist in. There's wild debate about whether an intelligent, controlling entity is behind the camera of this reality that we exist in. Now, Christians profess that all things have been created by one sovereign God, who eternally is in the divine director's chair. So if God is the universe's director, then how could we know that he's good? Movie directors, they can point to their output as a demonstration of how good they are, but do we think that God's output proves that he's good?
There you go. Thanks so much, Ben. And all right, so now actually we'll have it up on the. Oh, good, thanks, Emma. There you go. We have it up on the screen. If you have any questions, please send them in. I think I saw Ken typing away, so we'll definitely get to the questions as soon as possible. But I think it kind of begs to start with the question, though: what makes a director good, or even going to that next level, even great? Like, what takes them from good to great, or even just being a good director, opposed to just being a director? Because there's a lot of directors out there, but not necessarily all of them get recognized. We'll talk about that.
I think a good director is only as good as his last film sometimes, except in the case of Steven Spielberg, who's got this huge body of work. I think a good director's film, a film that makes us think, feel, experience joy, makes us think about life, the universe, and everything. A film that everybody's talking about, and there's probably a reason why they're talking about it. I think that often the film reflects the director and the director's point of view of the world, I suppose. So, yeah, I think that's possibly what makes a good director, is a good film.
Yeah, it's kind of hard, isn't it? Because you sort of walk in the process. If I was going to go practically as to what makes a good director, I was trained by one of the best producers in the business, and he used to say to me that the goal of the director is to find the golden spark that made the person, the writer, talk to the producer, and the producer bring that to a director, and the director take that to a production house, the production house go to the distributor. Whatever that spark is, that original idea that was in the conversation, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we did a film about people who steal dreams? You know, and if you can't say the spark in a sentence, then you haven't got it anyway. But the director's job is to find whatever the point is, whatever the nub is, and shepherd it ever so carefully from beginning to end, from conception to screen. And it's very, very difficult because some guys will come in and go, yeah, we can do like $1 billion on special effects. And before you know it, the special effects overtake the film. And who hasn't seen that happen? You know, or the actors, yeah, sure, Russell Crowe can be in the film, but he wants more lines. Since when did a lion matter to Russell Crowe? But anyway, you know, you've got situations like that, and it is the director's job to be heading these things off and going, no, that's great, but it won't contribute to the golden spark. It won't shine it up.
Can you do? Because we just had a question come across, and what is the difference between a producer and a director? Maybe you need to clarify that because they're not necessarily
pretty straightforward. The producer is far more important, but the director gets all the credit. Basically, the producer is a cook. Okay, so, or maybe even a cook's assistant, because the producer's job is basically to bring together the creative talent, whether they be the writer, the director, and so forth, the money, the studios, the distribution, and all that sort of stuff, and inevitably the director. And then they give creative control of the project over. And scriptwriters don't go to directors. I mean, maybe sometimes they do, you hear these funny stories. But generally speaking, scriptwriters go to production houses, and the production house then goes about going, you know who'd really make this film well? It'd be Spielberg, or it'd be Nolan, or something. Here's the idea. Some people like Nolan, you know, and M. Night Shyamalan, like, tie the thing up themselves by basically being writers, producers, and directors. Right. But generally speaking, the producer is a cook.
Right.
You know, and the director is the master chef who goes, okay, well, this is how I'm going to have it.
Okay, great.
I think.
And did you? Oh, sorry, Adrian.
Yeah, no, I think in the case of Nolan and Spielberg, they are often very involved in the whole process.
They're their own producer.
Right.
And like Christopher Nolan, he wrote Inception, so he put that whole team together with the help of a producer, I imagine. But
But that's not necessarily like a hallmark of quality, though, is it? Like to be in all areas of production, such as M. Night Shyamalan, who started out fantastically well with The Sixth Sense. Don't mishear me. He was excellent. That's an amazing piece of work. That is a good movie. However, it begs the question of, is he a good director looking at most of the other movies that man has made?
Go on, do it.
Like, oh, no, I'm going to... No, we're talking about this beforehand. But as opposed to some of M. Night Shyamalan's later movies, which I think are largely incoherent, or at least they don't...
Who was honestly scared in The Happening? No one. The people who were selling the tickets. They're the only people who were scared.
Yeah. Maybe incoherent's too strong, but a movie that's a bit of a jumble. I think most great directors don't make movies that are jumbles. Even if the movie is meant to be a jumble, then you're like a David Lynch film like Mulholland Drive or Lost Highway, something like that. David Lynch deliberately messes with your head, or Michel Gondry, who made Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, or even Christopher Nolan's Memento. Like, they're designed deliberately to warp your head, but they're not a mess. They're not. Whereas there's a lot of movies that are messes. So further to what Mark and Adrian are talking about of director controlling as much as they can the production process, that if they've got control, it does seem like the end product can be stronger and more like a unit. Not necessarily the case, but I think when you usually can tell a good film if you walk away from it and think, even if you did not understand it, you think overall it was a great package. There's something about that. That was a great package.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Actually, can I just say something really quickly? Sure. Because someone came up, and one of the best questions I've heard in these forums so far was asked after, so often you guys come up and talk, and they said, I don't really like films because I can't really, it's hard to think through them. They're often, and I think that's a fundamental mistake we make. Pictures are about feeling. If you want to really think an argument through, you're going to go and get deeper. Pictures tell you how to feel about a topic. They tell you how to emotively respond. And so the director knows that and knows that you are feeling this way when you come in, and he wants you to feel that way when you leave. Or she. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you understand everything that went on, but the feeling has got to be clear.
Oh, there you go.
Well, actually, there's a word for that. I need to do a...
Oh, go. Go, Adrian.
Go.
What's the word?
He did
Educate
He did Akira Kurosawa. You can't get it.
You introduced axiomatic.
Yes, I did. There you go.
Wow.
Okay, so the physical, bodily, emotional response to seeing a film is called a phenomenological response. That's what a director would like to happen to you when they walk into a film. So if you...
But that can be positive or negative.
It can be positive or negative.
Right.
Cry, laugh, joy, whatever. If you've had some very strong response during a film, could be hate, who knows, it's a phenomenological response.
Sometimes it's the wrong one. Who didn't laugh during Twilight? I mean, come on, it wasn't supposed to be a funny film. But I was sitting in a room full of reviewers when the first Twilight film came out. I think you were there too. And at the moment when Edward first walked on the screen, he looked like such a reject from The Cure. The entire cinema burst into laughter. They couldn't take it seriously. Yet, strangely, 16-year-old girls did.
That's right. There you go.
So
Thank you for that.
And me.
And you.
Yeah, I really liked it, as opposed to M. Night Shyamalan's The Village.
You did it.
Come on, man. Come on. So for a good director to make that movie, I question Shyamalan's.
All right, well, I'm going to get to one of the questions from the audience that, because I think with the directors, sometimes people lose credit for being a good director because, but the special effects were so good. And so some people say, oh, well, anybody can direct a film like that, like Inception. Come on, it was just really a movie about great special effects.
Really?
Now,
Those people.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean. But they give credit to. They don't necessarily. They take away the credit from the director and they look at the special effects. I mean, do we focus too much on it? And right now, it seems like almost every movie is CGI. Like, how much of it is not on a green screen and actually is directed?
Good point. It takes a good director, I think, to blast through the CGI. So I think for a long time, too many people were down on movies that had big special effects because it just seemed like the right thing to do. Like, it couldn't possibly be a good movie if it's just got if it's largely dominated by special effects. But I think, go back to the example of Peter Jackson with Lord of the Rings. Like, that man demonstrated across those 3 films that you can make amazing, important, sophisticated pieces of work with great special effects at the same time. So I think it takes a good director often to harness the potential of CGI as opposed to, let's keep going to negative examples, like the Green Lantern. The Green Lantern.
The first 3 Star Wars films.
Oh, there's a new one, the episode.
Yeah,
1 to 3.
But okay, so George Lucas was, at least with the first Star Wars, was like touted as this great director for that film. Why, when he gets to those other 3, why is he now bad or not good?
Look, even the weird thing is 5 out of 6 Star Wars films are badly directed. The only one that really is well directed is Empire Strikes Back, and it wasn't directed by George Lucas. George Lucas was a master. Star Wars had a huge impact because it was a film that had never been done before. It was this, and then it got knocked off by Battle Beyond the Stars and all this sort of stuff that comes
there
after.
was an Akira Kurosawa film that Star Wars was kind of based on.
If I go as far as to say that the interesting thing about George Lucas is that actors don't like to work with him because he gives them no direction. And so they're sitting in a situation where they don't know what to do. Look, The good director is John the Baptist. Okay, the good director is the fellow who says, wait.
Please continue.
I'm
John the Baptist.
I'm going
They didn't even
somewhere.
have film. What? Oh, sorry. Please continue.
You have so much to learn. Look, if you
You've
know
been watching the Bible on TV,
I
haven't you?
have,
And-
and Tuesday nights 9 p.m. It's really worth
yeah.
it. If
Sorry. Please continue.
if you've ever sort of turned over a couple of pages of the Bible and you've heard of John the Baptist, he says of himself, "I must decrease, that he, Jesus, must increase." The director knows his place in the film. Now, some directors are just all about their style and what they want to do and who they are. Tarantino.
Yeah.
It's just...
Amen.
I know. It's all about them. And that's actually not a good film. Whereas I would think...
But he has made good films, Quentin Tarantino.
Okay. But before I get lost in that point, what I want to say is take the other example. Take Spielberg and Saving Private Ryan. 6 Academy Awards, 7 Academy Awards, not one for Best Director, which brings Whoopi Goldberg to say, how is it that we got the best possible film and no one directed it?
It's the same with Driving Miss Daisy.
Yeah, exactly. The idea is that the message is the most important thing, and a good director knows that and will even cut off their style. There's a saying in the business, the edit floor is paved with gold. You've got to be prepared to drop your favourite scene if it doesn't contribute to the story. And I think the Bible is like that, because there's an interesting thing, a test for a good script. If you can take out a scene and it doesn't ruin the film, then it wasn't a good script. Okay, if this film was superfluous, but if it all has to be in there and it comes to the conclusion, then that is actually a great script. The Bible is this classic arc of dawning light until you finally come to Jesus, and it is so completely clear. You can't lose anything along the way. Right. If you lose it, you're left wondering why, who, what. It doesn't make any sense.
That's cool. One of the quotes from Billy Wilder, who some like it hot. Yep.
Great director.
He said, "The best director is the one you don't see, the one that you don't see that doesn't get in the way." So that's the argument for that.
Depends what you mean by don't get in the way or you don't see. Like most people would recognise a Martin Scorsese film, especially from 70s, 80s, 90s. Clint Eastwood, a little bit.
Like a Spielberg film.
Like a Spielberg film. There's a certain style to them. But I guess what you're saying is true, that as long as that style doesn't overpower, which often Ridley Scott could be accused of style over substance, which I think is a bit of a simplified argument for Ridley Scott. Like he often found substance in style. Movies like Alien, the first Alien, is like terrifying, but it's remarkably simple. Yet the style of it is powerful. But yeah, I think as long as the director, so Tarantino is a great example. Like if he can make amazing, powerful, shocking, memorable visceral films, but then he can ratchet up his own parents' ego and indulgence so far that he'll make the first Kill Bill movie.
Yeah, but for that matter, to the point that he uses his message as a justification for basically just going blood gore crazy on the screen sometimes, and that's just madness. Because what actually people come out remembering is not anything he had to say, but an impression of blood dripping down the screen. And again, good test of a good film. What do you remember afterwards? I don't know if you've ever sat in church, but if the only thing you ever remember off a sermon is the illustration, that was probably a bad sermon. Sorry to people who might preach sermons for a living. But if you come out of a film and the only thing you remember is that scene somehow disconnected when they dropped the Empire State Building on top of something, then that's really not. You didn't come away with the nub, the golden spark. You didn't come away with it.
Well, I apologize, but we're almost. If you believe it, we're almost out of time.
We did it again.
So, just to finish with a question from the audience, but also I think that because you alluded to it at the beginning, Ben, with your talk, and also it's been mentioned, kind of the connection between director and God. Is there a golden spark of the Bible, and also is there a kind of a connection with director? You kind of finished with that, the director and God. And is there a connection? Maybe you can kind of finish with that statement to be able to kind of go through.
I think the Bible's definitely the ultimate story that we should all be having a phenomenological response to. I think this whole series has been about how stories, our need for stories is kind of fueled by our desire to find out what lies after death and what life's about. And as Christians, as a Christian myself, I ask those questions, and the Bible is the source for that. So I guess that's how. That's the best example I've got for it.
No, I go with it. And I would say, look, just in a really short sentence, that C.S. Lewis once said, if you want to believe in heaven, believe one thing, it is more. And I feel that film and the Bible, the Bible is the meta story, but film does that too. It tells us there is far more than this day-to-day drudge. There is much, much more which you must interact with. Film keeps on telling us when we relax, when we get serious, we look at the Bible, it tells us there is more and you need to interact.
Right. Great.
I think it's a bit problematic could be problematic to describe God as a director, particularly as to go to the human level, we've talked about a lot of directors that we think are good, but then we'll also talk about the bad films that they've made. So good directors can make bad films, evidently. So then to jump to God, think, well, hang on a minute. If good directors can make bad movies, maybe God's making a bad movie right now. But to point to the Bible that Mark was just on about, that book, the Bible, I think the Bible demonstrates that no, God's made a good movie. And to go to a golden spark within it, because there's plenty of them, but one of them, in the letter that Paul wrote to the Romans in the New Testament, about chapter 5, I think it talks about how, or chapter 5, I think, talks about God proved his love. So as much as human directors can prove themselves by good movies, God proved his love for all of us, that even though we were sinners, so we weren't good, he sent Jesus, his son, to die for us. So in contrast to directors that good ones even can lose control, may not know what's going on, don't know what the plan is, they lose something during production, blah, blah, blah. That one verse in Romans, I think, would be encouraging everyone to go and have a look at and then think about in the framework of the Bible. Like, that is saying that God's in control, so much so that he orchestrated all of this, and it's out of love and his goodness. So to me, that one verse points to God's goodness, and I'd be encouraging anyone to investigate how the Bible demonstrates that God's a good director and his output is good.
Fantastic. That's a great way to finish, because that would really be where the reason why even doing this 4-week series, why we even look at film and the directors, the villains, and all the different things that we've looked at, is really looking at the Bible and kind of looking at the idea of the meta-narrative or the big picture of what God gives us with the Bible and many of the answers that we're looking for. Who is God? Who is man? All these different components that we can see. We maybe go to film, we maybe go to entertainment to try and find that, but really we can find that answer in the Bible. And that's what we probably want to leave you with the opportunity, maybe just kind of scratching that itch, of the opportunity to be able to come along and be able to investigate more about who this God of the Bible is and also who Jesus is. The two verses I probably would close with this series would be, first would be Proverbs 16:4. The Lord has made everything for its purpose. And looking at the fact that everything in life, really, there's a purpose and a plan, which may be kind of hard to understand or maybe difficult, like you were saying. It feels like we're in a bad story. How did I get in this bad movie?
You're 3/4 of the way through. It's very hard to know how the end is.
Exactly. And but also that there is someone that we can really look to, and I really like the golden spark moment in looking at the person of Jesus. And it says in Hebrews 12:2, looking to Jesus, the author, director, and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy, as you mentioned, the joy that is set before him, endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. And it's one of the things where we really want to kind of encourage you to be a part of and really see at City Bible Forum is looking at, understanding, and knowing more about who this person of Jesus is. We do this week.